Good evening. You're watching CNN Money Switzerland's continuing coverage of coronavirus in association with Salesforce. But first, let's get you the latest news headlines. Good evening. I'm Hannah Wise. The Swiss government will expand its financial help for startups using a system of guarantees to shield such businesses from lack of funding related to the coronavirus crisis. In a press conference this afternoon, the government admitted that the emergency measures for fledgling businesses had been too limited. In total, more than 154 million Swiss francs have been made available. Finance Minister Uli Maurer said that it was a long-term solution to secure financing over several years, so that Switzerland remains an important player on the global stage when it comes to innovation. Federal Councillor Alain Berset, meanwhile, said that even in cantons with many cases, the infection rate remains low. Over 28,000 people have had the virus here in Switzerland. More than 1,200 people have died since the pandemic first hit the country. Meanwhile, as Switzerland prepares to get back to work and reopen the economy next week, the Federal Council has permitted the canton of Ticino to extend measures, those lockdown measures, if necessary. Several million masks have arrived here in Switzerland from China. In the airline's first cargo-only flight to Geneva, Swiss International Airlines brought the supplies, which also included syringes on behalf of Geneva University Hospital and the Canton of Geneva. The Boeing 777 flew from Shanghai with the supply stored in the cargo hold and in the passenger cabin. Now, German biotech company BioNTech has received regulatory approval for clinical trials for a coronavirus vaccine. Now, the company is now the first to proceed with such trials. Several other companies around the world are also expected to get the go-ahead for vaccine trials, many of them within the coming weeks. Switzerland is planning to launch its own contact tracing app by May the 11th. App company Unique is working with both EPFL and ETH to develop the technology. CEO Matthias Welling explained to us the difference between the Swiss approach, which is decentralized, and the centralized data approach used by other countries. First, though, here's more about some of the first tests they carried out last weekend.
So one test was last weekend at EPFL, where members of the army were there, and we then equipped them with a calibration app. And there, these people then did tests there, and this data is now being examined, and we're looking how we can get the best results then for the calibration out of it. So with we, I mean basically the EPFL and ETH.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so other European countries are, of course, also working on contact tracing apps, and there are two ways: a centralized way and a decentralized way of saving data. In Switzerland, one wants to go with the decentralized way. So I was wondering if you can just quickly explain what the two main differences are.
So the main difference basically is so if you are using this Bluetooth strategy for contact tracing, or for proximity tracing, basically you send anonymized tokens at each visit you have with some other person running the app as well. So this is basically the same with both approaches. Now, at the point if some person is tested positive and then gives this to the app and says the app, okay, I'm positive, then at this point the others have to get notified. And this happens with our approach in a decentralized way. That means that everyone having all the contacts stored locally on their phone. So basically, you do this matching calculation locally, whereas in a centralized approach, this matching happens on a central server. And the difference basically is then that you have to trust this central authority that runs this server, whereas in the decentralized way, you have all stored locally on your phone.
Okay, so decentralized way, as Switzerland wants to go, the data stays on your phone. The centralized way that other countries are looking at, a third party that could be a state or health authorities would have to basically store that info.
Yes, so they basically have the information. Of course, it is also encrypted, but they have basically all the traces you had, all the encounters you had. and then they have to calculate this at their servers. Yes.
So in the Swiss version, actually, public health organizations, public health authorities don't get the info.
Yes.
Swiss florists are gearing up for Monday as Switzerland begins its first steps in reopening the economy. Here's one Geneva florist on how they are preparing for the big day.
Louise, just talk to us about the flowers that have been the most popular during the lockdown. What are people buying and what do you want to sell next week?
Well, in the beginning of March, the big hit was locally produced tulips. Really, really nice tulips as we have here. That was the big success in March. Now it's a bit warmer and we have very nice peonies, like you see here. And I also have a beautiful color like this. This is very popular. And we are also lucky to have locally produced roses, as you see here. So that I would say that's like the hit of the moment. It's locally produced, beautiful, fresh flowers from Geneva.
So for maybe some of the customers who think that they might want to go back to the stores on Monday, how will they know that it will be safe? What protective measures are there?
Well, we have decided to expose all the plants outside because, as you see, we have quite a big surface around the shop. So plants will be exposed outside, and most cut flowers will be exposed here where we have the orchids just right now, and some in the middle of the shop. We will make sure that there's enough distance between the client and also with the employees, of course. And we will also offer everything online on our web shop because we also want people to be, stay home and stay safe.
Now, Netflix may have almost doubled the number of subscribers over the coronavirus lockdown, but an uptick in usage won't save big tech from the challenges of the virus. I sat down with portfolio manager Richard Claude yesterday to discuss the impact of coronavirus on big tech. Who's been doing well in this current crisis and why?
I think there's just been a clear bifurcation in the market and within technology of the haves and the have-nots. And you can imagine that haves are very much in that work from home basket, that remote learning basket, everything that we're all being forced to do currently, whether that be Microsoft Teams, whether that be using Amazon, binge watching that series on Netflix, video games. All of those are beneficiaries of the stay-at-home and these lockdowns and everything that we're being forced to do in this devastating pandemic.
Have tech stocks kind of got immunity to what's happening in the crisis?
No, I certainly want to caveat that I think that the economic dislocation we're seeing is so great that technology is going to be impacted by that as well. I think that Pacific basket of stocks that we sort of talked about are going to see some longer term trends. There's a clear sort of surge today, but I think some of these behaviors will become permanent going forward. I think we can all imagine us doing more remote working going forward, using video games as entertainment more going forward, using the online grocery more going forward. We've seen in the past these crises do tend to accelerate existing trends, and we think this would be the case with this as well.
I was reading that according to Facebook, they've already said that the uptick in usage isn't necessarily going to save them in the long term because, it doesn't protect them from the decline in digital advertising, for example. I mean, do you see these kinds of challenges really having an impact on the likes of Netflix, Facebook, Google?
Well, I think digital advertising is a great example. So digital advertising grew through the great sort of financial crisis back in 2009. Now it's a lot larger and the economic impact from this is so much bigger. We're going to see some very nasty declines in online advertising in the second quarter and probably lingering into the third quarter. So this is very different and Facebook and Google are not going to be immune from it this time around.
How much of a test is coronavirus for tech stocks?
I think there's universal feedback from all of us that actually the move to working from home, remote learning, has actually been remarkably seamless. And obviously that's all enabled by all of these technology companies and the huge amounts of technology infrastructure we've built over the last 20 years. So that's a clear positive for technology and the value that we all prescribe to the technology sector and ultimately to what we're willing to pay for technology services and products. But, you know, it is a clear challenge for them. You know, we're going to see some significant impact. You know, we talked about digital advertising, but smartphones are being impacted, some of the more cyclical areas of technology being impacted. You know, being able to sell a software license, you know, is pretty hard in this environment. You've seen that, you know, SAP talk about that, and IBM last night. So this is going to impact across the board. I think, you know, we're all about survival in the next 3 to 6 months, and I think the key advantage for technology within that is they have these very strong balance sheets, particularly the mega caps. That's why the mega caps are outperforming the small caps so much, because they have those much stronger cash piles.
And these balance sheets, that's what's going to see them through any economic downturn that we're almost definitely going to see as a fallout from coronavirus.
Exactly. It's certainly a good starting point. You know, cash is king probably for the next 3 to 6 months. You're seeing companies around the globe, you know, having to pull dividends, raise capital, go to governments for bailouts, which normally have some strings attached. And you'll see generally, you know, you're not seeing many technology companies doing that or having to go cap in hand to investors or to governments. You know, they're still paying their dividends, and that's because their balance sheets are so strong.
But what about innovation that's born out of crisis? I mean, this is obviously going to, you've just said it yourself, this is going to change the way we work in the future, and tech companies, they have to stay ahead of that if they want to survive in the future. I mean, what kind of innovation changes are you seeing going forward?
I think we're seeing, you know, new cases always, you know, come, and the innovation we see out of, you know, these forced situations. So, you know, Zoom had 10 million users at the end of December. You know, it's well over 200 million users today, and the use cases for Zoom and the use cases for Microsoft Teams and remote learning, the use cases of technology to help track this virus and maybe move to sort of a contact tracing sort of post-lockdown world. We're seeing all these, you know, new ways of using technology that we never envisaged before this sort of global pandemic, and that might have some quite interesting implications for, you know, regulatory outlook for big tech as well. That, you know, that was sort of so kind of one way before this crisis, and I think there's a realization that some of these big tech companies have been quite helpful through this crisis and enabling us to move to this new normal that we have, and that hopefully that will lead to a more balanced debate going forward.
CNN's China correspondent David Culver was in Wuhan back in January and got out just before the lockdown was initiated. He's back there again now, 3 months later, to report on the changes in the city where COVID-19 was first discovered.
We are back in Wuhan, China, the original epicenter of the novel coronavirus outbreak, and you can hear behind me traffic. That's a good sign. It's an indication that life here is trying to get back online, that businesses are starting to resume, but there is this cautious optimism in moving forward, and there is strict screening in place so as to maintain control over this pandemic and this outbreak. Here in particular, getting here is a challenge in of itself. You want to, of course, strategically plan to make sure that you have documentation in order to indicate that you have been in this country, especially if you're a foreigner, for a certain period of time. The real concern is for imported cases, and given that Wuhan officials have said they have this under control now, they're wary of those who might be bringing in the virus from the outside. It's that external threat that they're mindful of more than anything else. And so to that point, they check passports. They want to make sure that you have documentation to suggest you've been in the country for that period of time. And going into, for example, a hotel, you go through multiple rounds of temperature checks. You go through sanitation to a rather extreme extent. They will even pull out a pesticide-like bottle that's got sanitation spray in it, and they'll spray down your clothes and spray down your luggage just to make sure nothing unwanted is coming along with you. Overall, though, this is a city that is, for one, massive, larger than New York City, but also navigating what is now a new normal. David Culver, Wuhan, China.
And don't forget, everything on the programme is available on our website. Just head on over to cnnmoney.ch. But let me leave you with these pictures from Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Suffering from climate change, a special technique is being tested there to try and save threatened corals. It's called cloud brightening. Researchers told Forbes magazine that they sprayed microscopic seawater droplets into the air, and when they evaporated, they formed tiny sea salt crystals which brighten existing clouds and deflect solar energy away from reef waters. Next year, the team hopes to scale up the size of the trial, but that is, of course, post-COVID-19 restrictions. Good night.